Did you know that in Canada, the government can permanently apprehend your children if you hold political views that they, being the government, deem reprehensible? That is the case in Canada, and today we'll look at a case that set this precedent. But first, remember that if we get to over 10,000 subscribers before the end of 2023, I'm going to regrow my handlebar mustache. So if you'd like to see that happen, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and encourage others to do so as well. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wands, but I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So as I said in the preamble, there is case law out there and statutory law in Canada that stands for the principle that the government can apprehend your children, put them into permanent foster care if you hold political beliefs that the government deems reprehensible. I learned this early in my career as a lawyer. Back in 2008, when I was a Crown Attorney in Manitoba, I remember the case that we'll discuss in today's episode very well because it was in the media a fair bit, and I recently revisited it to see what the permanent order was. I just learned back in 2008 about the temporary order, and just to give you a quick synopsis, it's a case that involved a child who showed up at school with a swastika written on her hand in a Sharpie marker. And that led to a Family and Children's Services investigation, which then led to the apprehension of that child on the basis that her parents were teaching her a hateful ideology. So we'll have a look at that case and discuss my concerns about the precedent for the government being able to take people's children if they disagree with their views. This is not a defense of neo-Nazism. This is simply addressing the question of should the government be able to apprehend your children, regardless of what your views are, if that government doesn't agree with them. So this is the case here with the final decision that awarded permanent wardship of children to the government. That's from the Court of Queen's Bench of Manitoba, as it then was, between the Director of Child and Family Services and DMP, WGS, and JAMP. As the Justice says at the beginning here, this case is about the welfare, protection, and best interests of two children, SMTS and ILP. They were apprehended by Child and Family Services on March 25th, 2008. So we'll look at a summary of facts here under the heading, The Agency's Initial Investigation and Apprehensions. So on March 24th, 2008, the young girl, SMTS, showed up at school with what was described as, quote, racist graffiti on her person. Her skin had been defaced with racist writings and drawings. She was sent home from school and told to wash them off. On the morning of March 25th, 2008, SMTS went back to school. Far from being free of offensive markings, she actually returned with more. The markings were not only greater in number, but also more prominent than the day before. So we'll look at here some of the things that they were. Drawings of swastikas, a drawing of a cross-like symbol under which was inscribed White Pride, Hail Victory, and Aryan Pride, an expression of Hail Hitler inscribed in code, and an inscription of Securing the Existence of Our People, and an inscription of We Must Secure the Existence of Our People, and a Future for White Children. So after these markings were observed on March 25th, the Family and Children's Services was notified. This child was interviewed by an abuse worker about the markings on her body and her understanding and her correlative beliefs. So SMTS stated matter-of-factly that it was her mother who did the markings. She did so with permanent markers. The child explained that the swastika on her right arm meant that black people don't belong. She explained further that white pride on her left arm meant to be proud as a white person in the world, and she explained that the inscription 14/88 on her arm stood for the 14 words, and 88 stood for HH, the 8 standing for the 8th letter of the alphabet. And the child said that she understood this to be an encoded expression of Hail Hitler. So she was asked some more by the abuse worker if there was any violence in the things that her parents taught her. She described some skinhead movies and videos that her parents showed her on the internet and what she'd learned from them. And she did learn some violent ideologies from that. She talked about beating black people with a chain with spikes on it, and said that her mother and father told her that. Asked if the things her parents talked about ever scared her. She said, no, black people just need to die. That's not scary. This is a white man's world. So I went into some detail there just to give you a very clear indication of what exactly were the beliefs that led to the apprehension of this child. Not to glorify or agree with those positions at all, but we can see these are some pretty disturbing views, and that goes to my opinion of why these people were targeted. They're low-hanging fruit. Who is going to defend these views? Who would say that people should be allowed to teach their children that? No one is going to defend this child or her mother from apprehension. They might not necessarily like it, but no one's going to stick their neck out for these people. So it's a very easy target to set a precedent for the state to be able to determine whether they like an ideology that children are being taught, and if they don't, to then take them. There was a police interview as well where the young girl was videotaped. She wasn't quite as forthcoming as she was in the earlier statement. So she was apprehended, and then her 2.5-year-old brother was removed from the parents' home and placed under apprehension as well. So the court looked at the governing laws under the Family and Children's Services Act of Manitoba. Every province has very similar legislation. Agency can apprehend children if the child is in need of protection. So the definition of a need of protection is where the life, health, or emotional well-being of the child is endangered by the act or omission of a person. So it's the emotional well-being is the basis upon which they said that these views being taught to these children was harmful to them, that it was harming their emotional well-being. Even though you can see from the answers of the child, regardless of how reprehensible you may find the views, the child didn't seem like she was scared or emotionally harmed by what her parents were teaching her. They have some examples given here. One of them is that if the child is likely to suffer harm or injury due to the behavior, condition, domestic environment, or associations of the child, or of a person having care, custody, or control of the child. So this is the section that they were going under. And the court found that the two children were in need of protection at the time of their apprehensions, and found that the emotional well-being of both children was endangered by the actions and teachings of their parents. So the actions being the inscribing of these symbols and words on the children, and the teachings of this kind of neo-Nazi skinhead ideology. So the court gave a little bit more detail, saying using a permanent marker on a child to publicize cultish slogans and opinions is not just irresponsible. Writing and drawing racist expressions and symbols on one child is not just bad parenting. These interferences with a child's person are batteries. So they're comparing this to physical child abuse. Saying that teaching one's child that black people just need to die is not just reprehensible parenting, it's the promotion of hatred against an identifiable group that's a crime, and children have the right to be protected from being taught such things. There was a charter argument raised by the father under freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Paragraph 96 cuts right to the chase of the court's view of that argument. They found that the parents' religious views and expression of those views are tangential to the child protection concerns, which must predominate. Translation from legalese to English is protection of a child overrules any rights that the parents might have to freedom of expression or freedom of religion. Furthermore, the court found that those views and their expressions are unworthy of the attention they've garnered. Essentially, what the court's saying is that you have the right to your own religious or political beliefs. You do not have the right to teach those religious or political beliefs to your children. So that should be highly concerning to anyone reading this. Again, we have to set aside whatever emotional reaction we might have to the particular views here. I mean, it could easily be something completely different. Consider an alternate scenario where it's devout communists who are praising liquidation of Ukrainian kulaks by starvation and saying, you know, the bourgeois like that, they just need to be killed. Imagine a scenario like that, or imagine some other extremist view, nothing to do with Nazism. The same holds. It's just wrong, in my view, to take away children on the basis of what their parents are teaching. Although those views that are also reprehensible, people should have the right to be able to hold them within their own mind and within their own family. And just to confirm the final results, we have at paragraph 113, subparagraph 2, that the Family and Children's Services were appointed to be the permanent guardians of the children, in this case. This case, right when I first heard about it back in 2008, I viewed this as somewhat of a canary in the coal mine for parents' rights and the rights to pass on their religious or political views to their children. Again, this is the low-hanging fruit. These are the people that hold views that no one would be willing to defend. People are not going to be upset when their children are taken away, but as I've said on this channel before, it's an axiom in legal circles that bad facts make bad case law. So we have the bad facts that we've reviewed. The bad case law is this proposition that the state gets to decide what views are harmful for children to learn and then take the children away if they make that finding. Let's extrapolate that a bit to what sorts of things does the state and media today say are harmful beliefs, are hateful beliefs. One of the big controversies raging right now is the question of children being given puberty blockers or gender reassignment surgery, as it's called, without the knowledge or consent of their parents in schools, and to be given indoctrination on these topics without the knowledge of parents. We hear about things like libraries being cleaned out in Toronto of any books written before 2008. People who oppose these things are routinely called hateful, called bigots, called anti-trans, etc. So in the current milieu, could parents be in trouble if they teach their children that having gender reassignment surgery when you're a child is not a good idea? That could be viewed hateful, could be viewed as hateful, I think. That's certainly the rhetoric we hear, and then you have this precedent here. So that's why I wanted to cover this case, even though it's a little bit older. I think it's very important for people to be aware of what the law is and consider governing themselves accordingly. People will say to me, well, I should have the right to express my views loud and clear, but there's the law on paper and then there's the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is that these parents would have never run afoul of the system. No one would have ever known what they were teaching their child if they didn't broadcast it by writing it in permanent marker on the child. So consider in what circumstances you want to broadcast your views on certain topics today. This video, though, is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, contact a lawyer so they can give you specific advice tailored to your situation. You can call another lawyer or myself. My contact information is listed below. Please send suggestions for show topics by leaving a comment in the comment section or sending an email to the email address listed below. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please help us get to 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I will fulfill my promise to regrow my handlebar mustache. So please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and sharing with your friends.